The situation around the city of Pokrovsk in the Donetsk region is gradually becoming more and more critical. Enemy drone operators were being authenticated, like confirmed inside the city itself. So these are the bad news for Ukrainian defense and logistic, because logistic is ultimately what decides the result on the front line. So nowadays, when their drone pilots are inside the city, the logistic for Ukrainian armed forces in the Pokrovsk region will become a really, really terrible thing. However, Pokrovsk is holding, and Ukrainian defense in Pokrovsk is holding. That's the most important thing, because some Russian propagandists they claims about its so-called encirclement of the city, but it's not true. We should state this. We should make this statement from the very beginning of today's overview, which I propose to all of you, dear listeners and watchers, and all our esteemed English-speaking auditory. I propose you to watch this latest update on Ukrainian battle map situation. My name is Vasyl Pekhno, and I ask you to push like buttons below this video, like it, so subscribe to this YouTube channel and leave your comments just below also, because it's really important to make this video more popular for the Western auditory, because to understand and to explain actually what is going on here in Ukraine, how hard is it to stay strong and firm in defense, but on the other hand, how we manage to do it. So let's begin. So the situation right now is truly on the verge of critical. I'm not a fan of this word. I don't usually say it, and I don't use it to describe various situations. But objectively right now in Pokrovsk, from the south, from the reported east, and from the west as well. More precisely, it's this section from the area of Zvirov and Shevchenko to Pokrovsk, where a window of opportunity is opening up. It is through this very window that the Russians are breaking through to the city. You can see all these locations on the deep state map. You can see all these zones through which the Russians are infiltrating and making their way into the settlement of Pokrovsk. On the satellite map, this might even be seen more clearly, especially with the settlements marked. That is, through this corridor, the Russians have established their logistics and are now bringing in not only infantrymen, but also pilots. And unfortunately, this is the information I'm starting with today. This is the overview, because honestly, this is the worst story one can imagine right now. This is the deployment of Russian pilots to the city of Pokrovsk. There is a video that has come into my possession. The video was shot from a Russian drone right at this location. At this location, in a high-rise building, is where the Russian pilots have holed up. And this video shows how the Russians are, let's say, flying around Pokrovsky with their drone. This is an interception from their drone. And you can even see the exact location where the pilots are landing. That's why, through thorough analysis and detection, we can determine exactly where the Russians have already settled. And the fact that enemy pilots are already operating within the city limits is very, very bad news. Because you can see it in the footage, right? You can see that this drone is flying around Pokrovsk, having been launched directly from within the city itself. Previously, the Russians were harassing our logistics in Pokrovsk by operating beyond our city. Now the situation is becoming much more complicated. The launches will be directly from the city if the enemy's piloting points are not destroyed. And this is a top priority task. It should be for our troops right now. Of course, I'm not, how should I put it, an advisor. I fully understand that, for example, the same Magyar commands the unmanned systems forces which are operating in Pokrovsk with his units. They, as well as the 7th Corps, understand perfectly well what needs to be done. That's another question. It's just that this needs to be given attention, including by the higher command, because this is a priority task. Otherwise, we really risk losing Pokrovsk. We truly risk losing Pokrovsk. Because I know of situations where there are quite a large number of infantry in a city where there is currently displacement. There are already episodes of gun battles in the city between our pilots from different brigades who are holding the defense. Pokrovskaya. And once regularly, those who engage in intense and frequent battles with Russian infantrymen, often finding themselves in shooting battles with Russian infantrymen on the front lines. And sometimes, unfortunately, it even ends in losses for our side. So if we do not block the enemy's penetration, if we do not level it and prevent further advancement, the consequences can be severe and difficult to recover from. In particular, if we allow this threat to exist and Russian UAV operators to fly directly over the city of Pokrovsk, then the news will be very bad. Well, it would mean that we will lose the city. This is a very likely reality, that we will lose the city, and together with Pokrovsk, we will lose not only Pokrovsk itself, but we will lose Myrnohrad as well if we don't change this, if we don't close it off, this window for the occupiers to break through, and if we don't simply wipe out their pilot positions. We will lose both Pokrovsk and Myrnohrad. By the way, regarding Myrnohrad, it's worth giving credit. Yesterday, there were comments from the spokesperson of the Myrnohrad agglomeration. Well, in general, let's say the Eastern Military Group of Frihori Shapoval reported that the Russians have entered the outskirts of Myrnohrad and street fighting is ongoing there. This too is something we have to acknowledge, that right now Myrnohrad is essentially surrounded in a kind of horseshoe. And right now we are in a very difficult situation, in particular in the areas of Moskovsky, Promin, and Sukiya Lisivka, where we understand what the logistics are like. Currently, logistics is the number one priority. This is a huge task, and understanding this issue is, in fact, crucial for gaining control over this agglomeration. In fact, everything can still theoretically be changed. The situation can actually be changed. At the moment, the situation is dramatic because in Pokrovsk, in the city of Pokrovsk, a huge gray zone has formed. Just a gigantic gray strip where, in fact, within this gray zone, as in Kupiansk, there is simply a continuous fog of war. There is no clarity about who is where, what is happening, or how positions are being held. There are numerous pockets of occupiers and a lot of local battles scattered throughout the city. The enemy is not launching a general assault, but is infiltrating instead. They move covertly in small groups of 2 or 3 up to 10 people. And according to 1+1 journalist Yulia Kirenko, a war correspondent who is now one of the few who continues to travel on assignments to the front, the number of occupiers in the city itself already exceeds 200. 200, as the general staff mentioned over the weekend, that was the number they acknowledged as the presence of Russians in the city of Pokrovsk. Now, according to Kirenko, there are even more of them. Essentially, what we have here now is a certain chaos in the defense, and formally, in some places, certain positions are reported from the bottom up as being held, but in reality, yes, our soldiers remain there, but the logistics and control over communications have, in many locations, slipped out of our hands. And the sooner we regain this control, the better, because along with the loss of this control, the overall morale of the troops is also slipping away. In other words, moral exhaustion is increasing exponentially. The soldiers become demoralized in such conditions, realizing that the situation is difficult and it is hard to handle. In this sense, they feel that the command is not paying enough attention to resolving these issues. I know that certain assault operations are currently underway within Pokrovsk, but
every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
God, I won't go into these specifics right now because that would go beyond the bounds of public discussion, let's put it that way, but it's not enough. You need to take out the pilots first and only then carry out assault operations. Pilots who have already appeared within the city itself, and that's actually very bad. So what's the news? Besides this, the occupiers are not stopping their assaults, including mechanized ones, to the north of Pokrovsk. This is the area that is relatively calmer, let's say, in the direction of Dobropilya. Because here, in the area of the Dobropilsky sector, attacks continue on the settlements of Volodymyrivka and Shakhove, which were mentioned yesterday by the Phoenix unit of the State Border Guard Service, who detected the movement of equipment and destroyed it. 12 units of armored vehicles, including 2 IFVs, 1 MTO, and 4 tanks, were destroyed. More precisely, that's 12 already damaged pieces of equipment, of which 7 are heavy armored vehicles. Over 40 occupiers. Among this landing force, which was supposed to land, some were detected and neutralized by our soldiers. Right now you are seeing footage from Phoenix. But overall, in principle, attempts at mechanized assaults in the Dobropilya direction are still ongoing. This is, in general, a quite typical and to some extent acceptable trend for the current front line. The enemy continues to pursue this approach. So accordingly, we will continue to see more footage like this. But the real issue is that this brings no benefit to the enemy at all. But these infiltrations of infantry directly into populated areas, this is what actually bears fruit. And yesterday, as I'll repeat once more, the spokesperson for the Eastern Military Group, credit where it's due, admitted that the enemy has already infiltrated Myrnohrad, where urban fighting is ongoing. Yes, all of this is happening without any consolidation. By the way, the same goes for Pokrovsk. All those vast gray zones, this is happening without consolidation. The Russians are simply roaming around and sometimes popping up unexpectedly in our rear. So you never know where exactly. And because of this uncertainty and lack of clarity in the situation, honestly, it causes really, really big problems for us. Ukrainian defenders are holding their positions along the entire Pokrovsk-Dobropilya direction, and at the same time, they are also building fortifications. But the situation requires much more attention from our command. Essentially, the same situation is continuing right now. In Kupiansk, where there are attempts to cut off the enemy who has relatively entrenched themselves in the city, there is a chance to isolate them. But so far, our troops have not been able to achieve this. In Kupiansk, the situation could potentially be a bit simpler from the standpoint that a river flows here, the Oskil. And because of the Oskil, for the occupiers, this is already a challenge. The Russians find themselves here in a critically difficult situation. They need to somehow organize their logistics. And it's possible to strike at this logistics, at this Achilles heel. Meanwhile, compared to Kupiansk in Pokrovsk, logistics have become our Achilles heel, because you can even realize what it means when at a distance of 6 kilometers, even 5.5, this, a very narrow strip, a very narrow corridor, just 5.5 kilometers wide, that our soldiers have to enter. Many soldiers are already publicly writing and admitting that at best only rear robotic systems are operating here. Or sometimes our infantrymen have to go on foot to get through this logistical route, but as you can imagine, going on foot is not a very safe option. It's 10 kilometers to the so-called Lisivka from here, and to walk that, well, you'd have to be extremely lucky to survive that. In other words, entering or exiting these locations is only possible if Pokrovsky is cleared. Right now, this is an absolutely critical issue for our command. Rodensky and Krishine remain locations that are important for our logistics, and our defense forces are holding them. So accordingly, there's no point in spreading those stories that Russian war correspondents write about Pokrovsk supposedly being encircled. We won't do that. It's not true. It doesn't reflect reality. The claim that Pokrovsk is supposedly surrounded is false. So that's the situation, friends. There's no need to take such information in a panic-stricken way. It's important to understand that the situation is actually very difficult, and that it has significantly worsened for the defense forces in recent times. It's very unfortunate to admit that only after the issue became public did any additional action begin at these positions. Well, I hope the situation can be corrected, although right now it is very close to becoming critical. To wrap up today's review, as I mentioned, the main focus has been on Pokrovsk. I want to show just one video from Kostiantynivka, which it would seem is a frontline town. And here drones shouldn't be such a serious problem, but they are a problem, because just yesterday a video appeared from the 24th Mechanized Brigade where their press officer was accompanying a Dutch TV channel for filming. They were filming the church that the Russians destroyed there, apparently with a shell or a drone strike. Anyway, the Dutch were filming it. This was specifically within the area of Kostiantynivka, and the press officer of the 24th Mechanized Brigade, Oleg Petrashuk, was there. At the same time, he is a phenomenal photographer, one of the best frontline photographers, and incidentally, truly one of the best press officers within the defense forces. He was accompanying this group, and as it happened, they managed to capture how he single-handedly shot down an FPV drone that was flying nearby, thereby protecting, among others, the film crew. So drones do reach here, and I suggest you watch this action video as a highlight to wrap up today's review. Although, of course, it's clear that it's somewhat mentally difficult to take in, but nonetheless, let's watch the video of how Ole Petrashuk, the press officer of the 24th Mechanized Brigade named after King Danilo, shoots back at a FPV drone and destroys it with small arms. Capture the church. Kostya, to battle! Glory to Jesus. Got it. Glory to Jesus. Oh Lord, I truly don't know what to do in this moment. Did you see that? Got it.
By whom?
I don't know, something over there.
Was shooting at you, right? Yes. What was it? FPV. FPV? Yes, certainly. A big one? Yes, absolutely. A large-scale one, indeed, with advanced fiber optic technology. My instructor. Don't stay here too long because they'll come back. And we have to hide somewhere around here. Daphne, 2 photos and go.
Well, I'll translate. Basically, he's saying, don't stay here. That's for the Ukrainian audience. Don't stay here too long because they'll come back. They'll come back. They shot down a drone that was flying on fiber optics and attacking a location in Kostiantynivka, but it was even brought down by a press officer. By the way, this even raises the issue of general militarization. I do understand that the press officer is a military person, not a civilian, but even so, potentially every one of our civilians needs to be able to understand and hone their shooting skills. I've always been a supporter of this idea, so I will continue to insist on it, as I always have. That's today's overview. It's not a cheerful one. Sorry that it's like this, but that's just how it is. I'll end it here. Thank you for your attention. Take care. All the best.